Before we get started, I actually forgot to introduce myself. My name is Stefan. I've been working with ValueSpace for a little over 2 years now, systems engineer by training, and now taking care of the marketing side of the company. With me is Louisa, co-founder and CEO of ValueSpace, who will be presenting for you today, and Kawe, our customer success manager, who will be giving the demo for you today.
And start the presentation. So I hope you can see my screen now. So thanks a lot, Stefan, for the introduction. It was really great to get to know a little bit about the audience as well today. And I hope that maybe when presenting, we can try to bring a bit more happiness and a bit less panic into the testing procedures in this world. So basically, I will present to you a bit on what our view on efficient hardware testing is. And to start with, because I know probably some of you have not heard so much about ValueSpace, maybe some of you are more familiar, but I will give a brief introduction on what ValueSpace is and what we do in general, and then I will go a bit more specifically into the test procedures and presenting a bit what we have found in our research as well. So basically, to explain a bit ValueSpace, we found during our times as engineers and with talking with engineers that usually in a project you spend a lot of time, actually from a survey that we did a while ago, 86% of engineering time is spent doing non-engineering work. So this means that a lot of time is spent searching for data, reading, searching for values, updating documentation, copy-pasting values. So this is definitely something that we at ValueSpace want to reduce, right? So we want to make the engineering process a lot more efficient so that you can spend more time on actually doing what you're good at, so doing the engineering work and less time searching for data and going through documents. So we have a small example here of how information should not flow in your team. And I'm sure that a lot of you will recognize this with the current workflow that we have. So what we call this is basically an information pull system. And this happens when, for example, an engineer is working on version 2 of a document and they change a design value of your product. So what happens afterwards is that they might upload this document to a SharePoint or to a shared drive somewhere. And other engineers will basically access that file and use those values or the latest updated document for their work and for their simulations, etc. But it might also happen that this engineer sends an email to their colleagues with that document. And now you start seeing the problem, right? Because now there's not just one document, there are several copies of the same document. And you have other engineers who then call their colleagues and ask, okay, so what is the latest value? Because I don't have access to that document that the first engineer changed, basically. And then there is maybe another department or another team that is still using the version 1 of this document, and other engineers that are using basically the wrong value in their simulations and in their work. So basically, you see here that the problem is that there are inconsistencies between these values and between these documents. And this is not really how it should work, right? So how we envision and how we envision ValueSpace to be used as well is more with an information push system, which means that all of the engineering data is saved in one single database. And when someone changes something, actually, this is in a central single source of truth. And basically, documentation is generated from this source of truth. So it's not like a copy of the document that is sent around, but it's automatically updated in documentation that is used for other analysis. And basically, the information push comes also because engineers are notified directly when the change happens, and not, you don't have to call your colleague to ask what is the latest change because you already got the notification about that change. And then other engineers can obviously use the latest values to do their simulations and calculations. So this is basically how it should work. And at ValueSpace, we try to give the engineers basically a full traceability along the engineering lifecycle. So basically all the way from requirements engineering to concurrent design, to detailed design and the loop where there are reviews and technical change management, and all the way up to testing and documentation. And all this happens in a single database, a single source of truth, where, as I showed before, the data is saved in that database, and then everything else is generated from that data: notifications, documents, dashboards, everything. So basically, as an example, imagine that one of your engineers has done some analysis and they want to change the number of battery modules in your product from 3 to 4. Right? So what happens when you do this change is that ValueSpace is actually calculating what is the effect of this change on the whole system. So it updates all of the values. It's also executing simulation, updating documentations automatically, verifying requirements, and actually notifying the engineers that need to be notified about this. So all of this, it's a lot of the automation that we saw in the first slides where you actually had some input. So it basically does all this automatically and in very short time, so that you're sure that everything is up to date. So just to summarize, so ValueSpace is a German and Portuguese company, and we provide a browser-based and real-time collaborative systems engineering platform. And from talking with our customers, it actually saves them 15 to 30% of their total development costs. So our customers are quite diverse as well. So it's not only space companies, but we work with other companies from aerospace and automotive as well. And they have various use cases for using ValueSpace. So all the way from the requirements engineering to the detailed design and the testing as well. So now let's come to the part that we all came here for today. So basically, how did we come up with launching this new testing module? So as you saw in the full life cycle of the engineering, basically the testing comes in the end, right? So at ValueSpace, we want to bring together that whole life cycle and be able to trace back from the requirements all the way to testing, and then from the testing also go back to the requirements and the design. So basically what we did is we asked our customers, we had interviews with engineers, and we found out basically the most frequent challenges that they shared with us. So here today, I will basically present you the 6 most frequent challenges that were shared with us and how we envision to solve them with ValueSpace. So first challenge, it's a question that basically a lot of engineers ask themselves: is this the latest version of my test procedure? And I'm sure you will recognize some of these questions that you probably ask in your daily work as well. When was the test last run? And how can I find back the test results from last year? So all of these questions basically talk about this problem that there is no single source of truth to find out the latest data, right? So with a document-based approach, it's very difficult to find out what is the latest version or when was the test last run and similar things. So basically what we need to be able to track these things is a single source of truth for all the test data. So that means that everything is stored in one single place. You also have the history of all the test runs, right? So you can track when a certain test was run. You also have a record of all the changes. So basically who changed what at what time. So you can have that traceability of going back to see what the changes were. And it also allows for more transparent communication. So instead of having this pool system where you have to go and ask your colleagues all the time what the latest values are, it's more transparent on where you are currently in your process and how your testing basically is built up from the start. So that's the first challenge. So the second challenge is also about some questions that engineers ask themselves all the time. So basically, did we cover all of the requirements in our testing? And who double checked this, basically? So this is a very frequent question that I'm sure a lot of you also ask yourselves in your daily works. So it's all about the traceability between requirements and tests, right? So it's very difficult when you have a document-based system which doesn't have inherently links to like track these things, to know basically if you have covered all of your requirements. So that's like the main purpose of having requirements, is that you actually can say all of my requirements are fulfilled, and these are the tests that I ran or the analysis that I ran to fulfill these requirements, to be able to show to your customers, to your stakeholders, that this product is actually is good to go, basically. So what you need is basically that traceability between the requirements and tests. So you need clear interconnections between those, and with links, so that you can see clearly from the requirements view what tests were run, and from the test view what requirements this verifies. You also need an easy overview of the missing links. So basically the main question is, like, while you're developing something, where are the links still missing that we still need to test for? And you also need to have a good change propagation, right? So whenever, for example, a test is run, it should automatically verify requirements, right? You should not have to go and copy paste then the results to another document. It should automatically happen from the system itself. So third challenge that we identified by these interviews is basically the question, where are the comments on this test procedure, and when can we plan this test? So basically what happens is, when you are a test engineer, or when you are writing a test procedure, you need to get comments from your stakeholders, from your customers, from your teammates, to be able to detail and iterate on this test procedure before it can be approved, and then you can start the testing, right? So basically, a very common way that is done today is that, okay, you have this document, you send it out to your customer, they make comments in this document and send it back to you. And this becomes very tedious because you have to send it to several different people, and then it's the job of the engineer to basically put all of this together and make sure that all the comments are accounted for, which is a very manual and very time-consuming job. So what you need to be able to do is to have an easy way to plan and review these test procedures while you are defining them and while you are detailing them. And what you need to be able to do this more efficiently is basically to have all the comments in one single place. So you don't want to send separate documents, but you want the commenters to go into the single system and comment all in one place. You also need a simple collaboration interface, right? So it should be easy for the customers to go in and comment, to see the latest version, and to be able to iterate a bit faster. So basically, these fast iterations will also allow you to come to the conclusion faster, to basically build up your detailed test procedure much faster. And you also need, obviously, to have the change tracking, to see the history of all the changes, to be able to have the traceability of who changed what because of what comments, right? So coming to challenge number 4. Another frequent question is basically, how many tests do we still need to run before we can release this product, or before we can start manufacturing this product? And when is the planned release date? So this obviously is very difficult to plan for if you don't know how long the tests are going to take, when is the hardware going to be ready, and this release date, what happens is that it's usually shifted quite a lot, right? So you plan for something, but then you don't know exactly what the plan of the test procedures is. So you have to push the release date back, and the project gets delayed. So what you need basically is a good way of reporting and tracking your progress. So basically finding out quickly what your current status is, like how many tests have we run already, how many were approved, and how many tests do we still have to go. Also seeing pending test runs. So it's all about seeing what work still needs to be done, and from there predicting when you can be finished with your testing. And also having a clear overview of the timeline of all tests. So the next question that engineers are asking themselves a lot is also, has to do with the hardware, right? So on which unit was this requirement verified? and which tests did we run on this piece of hardware, and how many cycles did we run on this particular piece. So basically having this traceability between the tests and the requirements and the hardware that it was run on is very important for engineers to, or for the company to keep track of. So you need to have a good way of tracking units under test. And you need to be able to run the same test on multiple units and still keep track of when was this test run on that unit and how many tests were run. It's also important to know which test version was run on which unit, so that you can basically trace back on, maybe I ran an old test version on a certain unit and you will need to test it again because the test version changed. It's also important to be able to see the full testing history of each hardware piece, because you, for example, if you do a test where you have to, a thermal vacuum test or something, you need to be able to know how many cycles did we already do on this piece of hardware to know, can this be used maybe in production later, or can we use it for more tests, or how basically, what is the state of this particular hardware currently. And coming to the last of our 6 challenges, something that is very often asked in the late stage of a project or when you're starting a new project is, how can I leverage the past project learnings for my new project? And how can I prevent past mistakes, maybe even more importantly? So the important thing here is that you should have a reusability and be able to improve on your test procedures from your current project to your next one. And quickly find out what tests you can repurpose, what tests you can run again. So imagine you're using the same battery in your current project as you will in your new project. So can you actually reuse these tests? Yeah, that would be much faster, of course, to be able to just say, I will do the same test, which has already been proven on that battery. You should also be able to copy and reuse the complete project setup. So you should be able to start from a certain point of your previous project and then improve on that setup for your next project. And also implement past comments. So you can basically trace back from your past project what went well, what went wrong, and implement those comments directly in your new projects as well. So to summarize a bit, these are the basically 6 main or most frequently asked questions and challenges that we get when we talk with our customers and when we interview engineers. And we will show you in a bit on ValleySpace itself, on the software, how we try to solve these challenges and how ValleySpace can help you in these cases. But first, I will hand over to Stefan to do a bit more of an interactive session.
Thank you, Louisa. Very interesting presentation. I hope that everyone learned something new. I'm resharing my screen. If you can just confirm that you can see it. So there has been one question so far from the beginning. I'm just reminding everyone, in case you have any questions, please head over to haslide.com/valleyspace. We'll be combining all the questions here, and at the end, we'll be going through all of them. So if you thought something was maybe interesting to explore a bit further from the presentation that Louisa just gave, or now in a little bit when Kao is giving the actual demo on the product itself, if there's any specific points that you want to know more about, please post your questions here so we can go through them after. So before we proceed with the demo, I just have some very, very brief questions. So from the challenges that were shared earlier by Louisa, which are the most, let's say, difficult processes or tasks for you when you manage testing? Obviously, if none of this is applicable for you, you don't have to answer, but we're very curious to find out, like, what are more or less the biggest pains that you see in your team as part of your work today? Okay, so centralizing everything seems like a very important point, and also the progress reporting and the tracking. One specific on tracking units under test. This is something that we'll be focusing on also a lot during the demo. Kao will be showing you a lot of these points. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. And the next question is basically an open one. Like, besides those that we just shared, is there anything else that has come up that you were thinking like, hey, actually, this is something that you guys didn't present, or this is something that I really am facing, but or I've heard from others that they have similar challenges like I do? I remember from the beginning and interactive part, someone said nothing works. So I'm curious if there's any other challenges besides the ones that we just shared for you to let us know. Okay, that's I would say this is great news. Okay, keeping the team updated. Yep, that's definitely important on reliability, integration with the hardware. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. This is very, very helpful. We can maybe dive a bit deeper into some of those at the end during the Q&A, indeed. The cooperation, the collaboration, keeping a team updated. It seems like a very important topic here. So amazing. And then one, let's say, maybe a little bit out there question, which may not be clear to everyone what it means. I don't know if any one of you has heard of the test-driven approach. Basically, in the software development industry, oftentimes software is built by first off actually designing the test for the functionality that you want to add, then writing the actual code which would fulfill that test, and then actually updating that code until it passes the test. And I'd be curious to hear if you're working in the test in test management as a whole and test engineering, if you think that this kind of test-driven design approach is something valuable in the hardware industry as well. We're hearing usually very divided ideas between this, and oftentimes people take a mixed approach in which you test very early on some of the parts, but then you start designing, and then you write test procedures later on. But it is an interesting avenue to explore. Okay, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. This is really, really valuable. I'm gonna move on to the demo with Kawe. And before I do that, I'd like to just leave this page open again for the questions, so we can at the end then go over them. Kawe, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. So let's see how we can do all of that we were talking about directly in ValiSpace. So I hope you can all see my screen and hear me well. And before jumping directly to the test module, I think it's worth it to take a couple of minutes just to go over the overall features and modules that we have in ValiSpace, just so you understand how everything connects together, as we aim to be a single source of truth and have all your project traced in ValiSpace. It's good to understand how the other features will help you as well. So really quickly, it's a lot to see in just a couple of minutes, but quickly the concepts are, we have the project module that gives you a project management perspective, so you can understand the timeline of your project, all the tasks that needs to be done, and the relationship between that. Also understand, for example, the critical path and the workload for your team. You can also see tasks in different ways, see all the discussion that is going on your current project, and also, of course, manage all your team, the permission side and everything. On the components module is actually where you do your architecture definition. So you define all your system, subsystem, and elements. So here on the sidebar, we have different elements and subsystems. And here we have the actual properties of your system. As Luis was mentioning, for example, when you create a model, you make all the dependencies. So if someone changes, for example, the mass of the antenna, all the change will be propagated, and you will see at the end how this is impacting my entire system. And we can also manage properties that are mode dependent. So power consumption, for example, your system might be on, off, or on maximum, and you might have different power consumption or mass flows, for example, and different properties that can be mode dependent. the requirement modules, it is a requirement management tool where you can actually formally describe all your requirements with its relationship between parent and children requirements, and also define the verification method. So how you're actually verifying that those requirements holds true on the current state. And we have some verification methods that are automatic verification. So you link the properties in your requirements with the properties in the components module. So every time that someone changes anything, you will directly see how it impacted on my requirements verification. And of course, this will also connect with our test module that I'll get back later. The analysis is the automatic documentation part. So we have that document here where you can write and make live links with the properties and the mass budgets and requirement tables. So from example from Luis, if someone changes the battery or change a mass or a thickness of an element, everything here will be automatically updated, and you have always this latest version of the document that you can that your team will have always the same view, and you can always share that with external people. The time sequence module, I don't have an example here, but it gives you you can model or simulate a time variable property. So you saw here that we have power consumption, so we can simulate, for example, or calculate how long my battery will last given a specific condition or a nominal emission, for example, or how long my propellant tank will hold given a specific mass flow, and so on. So every time-dependent properties will be calculated on the time sequences. The simulations, you can have Octave code, so similar to MATLAB code here. So connecting your properties as inputs and outputs and have a more complex calculation done directly here in ValueSpace. And then finally, the new test module, where you can have all your test procedures. So here on the sidebar, we have some examples of a battery discharge test, solar array, and etc. And on the right here, we have the test procedure specifically. So step by step, what it needs to be done. So imagine you are the system engineer and you understand that you need to do the solar array test to verify a set of requirements. So you can start on a high level, just, okay, voltage check, current check, and then compare the power results. And later on, you can invite your colleague that is more, understand more on how can you do the test engineer, and start populating this test procedure with more details. So step by step, what are the steps that needs to be done, what needs to be connected with what, and so on. And you can also, of course, add attachments and pictures and tables that you need to compare during your test. And apart from having this shared view that everybody will always see the latest version, you're not you won't have the issue of like, please check the PDF version 3.3 TBD. You always have this view that is always up to date to everyone. We have other collaborative features. So for example, the discussions. So if I am a test engineer, I'm reading this test and I realize that this can actually be done because we are missing something, I can just mark a colleague. In this case, I will mark the admin and say, this step cannot be done. So my colleague will receive a notification, and then he can come directly to this discussion and add an argument that actually it is possible, or okay, I already modified it. And whenever I'm satisfied with that, I can close this discussion to resolve, and it will clear my work in here. You can also subscribe to the objects. So you will always receive a notification if anyone changes anything. So it's a good way to keep control of your team's work. And more important as well is that, well, here we have the connections to the requirements. So for this solar array, you know that we have a requirement saying that the maximum voltage of the solar array shouldn't be more than 20 volts. So since we are testing this, we have the specific step that we are measuring the voltage. We will link this to the actual requirement that say that the requirement, the the voltage should not exceed 20 volts. So you have this full traceability of requirement definition and test procedure. And this is one way to see it as from the test perspective, but we can also go back to the requirements perspective and see, for example, going to the solar panel specification, we can see all the requirements that we have that has a test procedure assigned, and we can see the ones that has already a test procedure defined, or the ones that are still complete or incomplete. You need to define those test procedures. And well, apart from that, we also offer a lot of visual aids to help you understand your system and your requirement definition. So these simple connections views that show you the relationship between the requirements, but also these status views that automatically generate matrix view, verification matrix, sorry, that shows the status of each specification according to each component. And also, for example, this tree view that gets the system breakdown that we have here on the components module and color coded according to the status of the verification method. So with this view, you can do a coverage analysis and see, okay, how far are we, how deep are we defining our verification? So how long are we testing up to which element? And after on the project, you will see your tree getting greener and greener once you have everything tested. And when everything is green, you're good to go, good to launch. Well, coming back to the tests, here we have the definition of the test, but you did say, for example, which units are applicable for that test. So for this specific example, we have the solar array and the solar array model, which is an engineering model that we have apart. But you still need to track and manage all your test runs. So here we have the runs tab that shows you the status of all the runs that you've done and also the planning that you have. So for example, here we can see that we had the first run on the engineering model. It was on December 10th and it failed. So again, on January 11, we run it again and it was passed with deviation. So we already planned on March, for example, to do a third run on the engineering model, which has not started yet. And of course, here we have the test on engineering model, but we already started planning the test for the flight model, for example, that is applicable to the actual solar array. And it's also planned for April 1st. So here you have the clear view of all the tests that you still need to run for this specific test procedure, but you can go to the test procedures and then see all the tests that you have, the number of tests, the number of runs that you've done already, and all the status of all the tests that you need to do. And you can also leverage the connection here with the planning, with the timeline, so you can clearly understand when you will have space to do the testing, and also to understand what's the impact of delaying or remaking a specific test on your entire project. Well, and finally, like everything in ValiSpace, you do have the history. So on the database, every change is stored. So you can always go back and see how my test procedure was last month and what was the change done and which user did it. The same thing for all the requirements and all the properties, by the way. And the objects in ValiSpace can also be copied. So if you have one test procedure that is similar to another test procedure that you need to run, you can simply copy this test procedure, make the modifications necessary, and there you have it. You don't need to spend a lot of time redesigning everything. And in the case that you have a recurring project or a similar project that your company will start, you can also copy the entire project. So all the projects, all the objects in ValiSpace will be copied, and all the relationship as well, they will always be there, also be there. So you can start working from it instead of working from scratch. Yep, I think that's a really quick overview. I'm really excited to show you all. There is a lot of other features in ValiSpace in the test module that is not enough to show in 10 minutes. So I hope it was clear and you enjoyed it, and I hope you want to go a little bit deeper on checking ValiSpace.
And for those of you who are actively looking to change processes, I actually wrote out this slide here specifically because what we've seen is very good steps from different teams as well that have changed our engineering process. The first step is really identifying like what is slowing you down your process, right? Like try and identify what are the things that you think are really challenging for you. And then over a call where we can basically just do like a Q&A call, either with Kawe, with myself or Louisa, we can basically just discuss which parts are the ones that you really want to tackle. And if we see that some of those we can actually help with, we always give a 2-week free trial. So you can actually see how ValleySpace can help within a very specific part of your work. And then you can decide for yourself whether it's like a go or no go, whether or not you want to continue with it. So I would say for everyone who said, yes, I'm actively looking to actually change my processes, we really look forward to hearing from you. Just send us an email and we'll be happy to chat. So with any other questions or comments or feedback, I'm leaving my email address here directly as well. We'll be very happy to hear from you in case you have any other thoughts or suggestions. We will be sending a follow-up email as well with the recording of this session. It may take a few days for us to process it and put it online. And stay tuned for the blog articles as well that we'll be sharing on the how-tos. It's been really, really fun to have you all here. Very interesting discussions. Thank you also to my colleagues who helped organizing all of this. And we're excited to see you soon again. I wish everyone a very nice morning or afternoon. I saw that most of us were in Europe. Very nice evening as well, and hope to see you again soon.